Stories like this don't just unfold, they detonate. The audience doesn't know it yet, but they're about to witness something rare. Not a shout, not an insult, not chaos, something colder. Joy leans back in her chair, arms loose, voice sharp with practiced confidence. She's done this for decades. Steered conversations, pushed guests, poked until something interesting bled out. Her tone is playful, but there's an edge underneath it honed by years of live television, where hesitation equals weakness. So Eddie, she says, smiling for the cameras, people say you disappeared for a long time. Some even say Hollywood moved on without you. A ripple of laughter passes through the crowd. Light, safe, expected. But Eddie doesn't laugh, he blinks once slowly. In his head, time stretches. He hears the echo of arenas from the A's. The roar, the critics, the fall, the silence, the comeback that never needed permission. He's been underestimated before by studios, by critics, by an industry that once decided he was finished. This moment feels familiar. He adjusts in his seat, folds his hands together, and finally looks at Joy. Not past her, not at the audience, but at her. Moved on, Eddie repeats softly. The way he says it isn't confrontational. It's curious, like he's examining a word he's never heard before. Joy tilts her head. Well, you know what I mean. New generation, new voices. The cameras cut to Whoopi Goldberg. Her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes anymore. She's sensing it now, the shift, the subtle tightening in the air. Whoopi has been in rooms like this. She knows when a moment is about to turn. Eddie nods slowly. Yeah, he says. New voices are good. Pause. The audience waits for the punchline. It doesn't come. Instead, Eddie continues, his voice even controlled. But it's funny how every time one of those new voices wins an award, he says they still mention the people who came before them. A few heads in the crowd nod instinctively. Joy chuckles, waving it off. Well, sure, legends get mentioned. Eddie smiles again. This time it's different. That's the thing about legends, he says. They don't need to announce they're still here. The applause starts hesitant, unsure, like the crowd doesn't know whether it's allowed to clap yet. Joy leans forward now, her tone tightens. So, you don't think you ever faded? Eddie exhales through his nose. Not a sigh, not a laugh. Something in between, I think, he says carefully. There's a difference between fading and choosing silence. That lands harder. The audience noise swells, then cuts itself off as if someone turned a dial. Joy's eyebrows lift just slightly. She's recalibrating, realizing this isn't going to be a light back and forth. But silence, Joy presses, can look a lot like irrelevance. Eddie. There it is. The word hangs in the air like smoke. Irrelevance. For the first time, Eddie shifts fully toward her. His posture straightens, not aggressive, not defensive, just present. The smile fades completely. You know, he says, voice still calm. I've noticed something about irrelevance. Joy doesn't interrupt. The people who are irrelevant, Eddie continues, rarely get asked why they're irrelevant on national television. The audience gasps, not loud but sharp. Collective. Whoopi turns her head slowly toward Joy. Joy laughs, but it's a half second too late. Touch. Eddie nods. I thought so. Another pause. Longer now. The kind producers hate because it can't be edited out. Eddie looks out toward the audience, not the cameras, real people faces. When I stopped making movies every year, he says, I was told I was scared that I lost my edge. That comedy passed me by. He turns back to Joy. But the truth is, he says, I just didn't feel like screaming anymore to prove I existed. Joy shifts in her chair. And you think screaming is what people do now? She asks. Eddie shrugs slightly. Sometimes people confuse volume with importance. The audience reaction this time isn't louder, it's murmurs, whispers. Phone subtly lifted. Joy tries to steer it back. So you're saying today's stars? Eddie raises a hand gently. Polite, almost respectful. No, he says, I'm saying today's moment moves faster than people and not everyone wants to chase. He leans back now, finally relaxing. I didn't disappear. Eddie adds, I just stayed long enough for people to miss me. That's when the applause breaks, fully, loud, uncontrolled, erupting from somewhere deeper than politeness. Joy claps too, but her smile is tight. The camera zooms slightly on Eddie's face, calm, unshaken. And in that calm, something brutal has already happened. The confrontation isn't over. It's only just begun. The applause doesn't die down the way it's supposed to. It lingers, ragged, uneven, like the audience isn't clapping for Eddie Murphy anymore, but with him against something or someone. Joy Behar keeps clapping too, smiling wide for the cameras, but her eyes flick briefly toward the producers' table. It's instinct. A lifetime reflects the unspoken question flashes across her face. How far is this going to go? Eddie notices. Of course he does. He's been watching rooms longer than most people in this audience have been alive. He knows the difference between applause that celebrates and applause that warns. This is the second kind. When the clapping finally phases, it feels heavier than before, as if the room itself has leaned forward in its chair. Joy clears her throat. Well, she says lightly, that was poetic. A few nervous laughs ripple through the crowd. Eddie tilts his head. Was it? Joy shrugs. I mean, you're talking about silence, choosing not to chase the spotlight. But this is television. The spotlight matters. Eddie nods slowly, considering her words as if they deserve genuine thought. Of course, as he says, that's why people fight so hard to stay under it. Joy smiles, including you apparently. There it is again. Not an attack, something subtler, a hook, disguised as humor. The audience senses it. You can feel their bodies tighten, anticipation crawling up their spines. This isn't banter anymore. This is positioning. Eddie doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he looks down at his hands. In his mind, memories surface uninvited. Studio executives smiling while saying no. Headlines dissecting his choices like a crime scene. Late nights where the phone didn't ring and mornings where he was grateful it didn't. He looks back up. I don't fight for spotlights, he says quietly. I let them come find me. The audience murmurs again. Joy leans forward, elbows on the desk now. Her tone sharpens, not aggressive but firm. But don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with influence, especially when people still listen to you? Eddie's eyes flicker, not with anger, but recognition. That's a good question. He says he pauses. Then, do you feel responsible for what people take from this show? The shift is immediate. Joy blinks once, twice. That's not. She starts, then stops herself. Of course I do. Eddie nods. Good. He turns slightly, gesturing toward the audience, the cameras, the invisible millions beyond them. Because influence isn't just about being loud, he says. It's about being careful. Whoopi shifts in her seat now, her body angled toward Eddie, her expression unreadable. She knows what careful sounds like when it comes from someone who's survived the industry's cycles. Joy chuckles again, but it doesn't land. Careful. We're having a conversation. Eddie meets her gaze, steady, calm. Exactly. He says, and conversations shape how people see themselves. The audience is dead silent now. Joy's smile fades just a fraction. So what are you saying? That we shouldn't ask tough questions? Eddie shakes his head. No, I'm saying how you ask them matters. He leans in slightly, lowering his voice. Not enough to miss the mic, just enough to draw people closer. When you ask someone why they faded, he says, you're really asking whether they still matter. A soft gasp ripples through the audience. Joy's jaw tightens. I think you're reading into it. Eddie nods again. Maybe. Another pause, but I've spent enough time being read into to recognize the language. The camera cuts to a wide shot of the table. The hosts sit frozen in their seats, caught between professionalism and discomfort. The audience feels like they're witnessing something unscripted, something dangerous. Joy exhales sharply. You know, Eddie, comedy has always been about pushing back, about challenging people. Eddie smiles faintly. I agree, she presses on. So why does it sound like you're criticizing that now? Eddie's smile fades, not completely, just enough, because there's a difference, he says, between challenging people and challenging their worth. The words Lang opens her mouth to respond, but Eddie continues, still calm, still measured. When I came up, he says, people challenged my jokes, my delivery, my ideas. He shrugs. They didn't ask me if I was finished as a human being. The audience reaction is immediate. A low collective O echoes through the studio. Joy sits back, crossing her arms. No one said that. Eddie tilts his head. Not out loud. The silence stretches again, uncomfortable now, like a note held too long. Whoopi finally speaks, her voice gentle but grounded. I think what Eddie's saying is there's history here. Eddie nods once, grateful but not rescued. Exactly, he says. History has weight. He looks back at Joy. And sometimes when you've carried enough of it, you don't feel the need to prove you're still standing. Joy's lips press together. She nods slowly, but her eyes harden. So, you're saying stepping away was a choice?
Yes, and not fear, no, not failure, no.
Joy studies him for a long moment. And if people thought it was, she asks. Eddie's response is instant. Then that says more about what they need from me than what I... Not fully, not yet. But the tension breaks, just enough for clapping to surge like a wave hitting rocks. Joy joins in again, slower this time. Well, she says when it settles, that's certainly one way to look at it. Eddie smiles politely. It's the only way that kept me sane. Another beat. Joy glances at her cards, then back up. You know, some critics say your recent comeback works because of nostalgia. There it is, the sharpest blade yet, and it stiffens collectively. Eddie doesn't flinch. Nostalgia, he repeats softly. He leans back, folding his arms loosely. Do you know why nostalgia works, he asks. Joy raises an eyebrow. Enlighten. Because it reminds people of a time, Eddie says, when they felt something real. The audience reacts audibly now, approval mixed with awe. Eddie continues, voice steady. And if my presence reminds them of that, he adds, then I'm not embarrassed by it. Joy shakes her head slightly. Some would say that's living in the past. Eddie smiles again, this one warmer but no less dangerous. Only if the past is the only place you were ever honest. The studio goes completely still. No laughter, no clapping, just silence. Joy opens her mouth, then closes it for the first time since the segment began. She has nowhere safe to step. The camera zooms in on Eddie Murphy's face, calm, centered, unmoved. And somewhere in the audience, someone whispers what everyone else is thinking. He's not angry. And that's worse. The tension doesn't break, it coils tighter because the conversation hasn't peaked yet. It's descending deeper, sharper towards something no one planned and no one can stop. The silence after Eddie's last sentence isn't empty. It vibrates. The kind of quiet where every cough sounds illegal, where even the cameras seem to slow their movement as if they don't want to disturb what's unfolding. Joy Behar sits perfectly still, hands folded now, posture rigid, not defensive, not relaxed, calculated. Eddie Murphy waits, not because he has to, because he knows. Joy inhales slowly, then lets out a controlled laugh. You know, she says, people tune into this show for honesty. Sometimes honesty is uncomfortable. A few audience members nod automatically, like muscle memory, kicking in. Eddie nods too. I agree. That answer throws her off for half a beat. So Joy continues, let's be honest. You stepped away at the height of your power. Some people say you lost touch with what made you relevant. There it is again. Relevance. This time the word doesn't drift, it strikes. The audience stiffens, bracing. Someone in the front row presses their lips together. This feels less like a question now and more like a test. And everyone knows Eddie Murphy is very good at tests. Eddie leans forward just slightly. You ever notice, he says, calmly, how relevance is always decided by people who already have a microphone? A sharp ripple of reaction moves through the studio. Joy tilts her head. What we all do right now. Eddie smiles faintly. Exactly. When I was 22, he says, I was relevant because I was loud, fast, fearless. People wanted the jokes to hit hard and leave bruises. He pauses, eyes drifting briefly past the cameras. When I got older, he continues, I realized bruises aren't the only proof something mattered. Joy crosses her legs. Comedy evolves. Audiences change. Yes, Betty says, but respect shouldn't disappear in the process. That lands. Joy shifts again. Are you saying you weren't respected? Eddie doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he looks out at the audience, real faces, different ages. Some grew up with him, some met him later through reruns and stories, through echoes. I was respected when I was profitable, he says finally. A low murmur rolls through the room. And when I stopped being profitable every year, he adds, the respect came with conditions. Joy frowns. That's not. Eddie nods. I know, I helped build it. The audience reacts audibly now, approval mixed with disbelief. Joy leans in, voice firmer. But you came back. Big projects, big roles. So the system clearly still wanted you. Eddie meets her gaze. Holds it. No, he says, the system wanted what I represented. He lets that breathe. A reminder, he continues, that some people don't vanish just because you stop hearing from them. The cameras cut to Whoopi again. She nods once, slow and deliberate. Joy presses her lips together. So what? This is about legacy. Eddie chuckles softly, not amused, reflective. Legacy is what people argue about when you're gone. He says, I'm still here. That line draws a sharp intake of breath from the crowd. Joy's eyebrows rise. Then what is this about? Eddie's voice lowers, not in volume, but in gravity. It's about control. The word lands heavy. Joy stiffens. Control? Who gets to decide? Eddie says when someone's story is over, the audience feels it now. The shift from celebrity talk to something deeper, more uncomfortable. Joy exhales. No one here is trying to end your story. Eddie smiles faintly, I know. He tilts his head, but the question you asked implied it. Some gasp, some nods, some stunned silence. Joy straightens. I think you're projecting. Eddie shrugs. Maybe. He pauses, then adds, or maybe I've been in enough rooms like this to recognize the pattern. Joy's tone sharpens. So, what pattern is that? Eddie answers without hesitation. When someone lives, the version of them that made other people comfortable. That hits like a punch to the chest. The audience erupts. This time applause breaks through, loud and unrestrained. Someone else shouts, Mao. Joy waits it out, jaw tight. When it fades, she says, you're making this sound personal. Eddie nods. It always is. He leans back, finally relaxing into his chair as if settling after a long walk. When you're young, he says, people tell you who you are. They label you, box you, celebrate you. He looks at Joy again. And when you don't behave the way the box expects, he continues, they start asking where you went. Joy opens her mouth, then stops. The audience senses it. She's lost the rhythm. She tries again. But isn't that just the price of fame? Eddie's response is soft. No, he says, that's the price of ownership. A hush sweeps over the studio. Eddie continues, measured and unflinching. I never sold myself, he says. I rented attention. There's a difference. The room feels smaller now, tighter. Joy swallows. You're very sure of yourself. Eddie smiles, not cocky, not smug. Certain. I had to be, he says. Silence tests you. It shows you who you are when no one's clapping. The audience absorbs that. Some nod slowly, some sit frozen. Joy tries one last pivot. So, what would you say to people who still think you walked away because you couldn't keep up? Eddie doesn't hesitate. I'd say, he replies, keeping up is for people who are afraid to slow down a beat. And slowing down, he adds, is how you notice who's really standing with you. The applause this time is thunderous. Joy claps, but her smile doesn't return because the truth has settled in the room, now undeniable. This isn't about Eddie Murphy defending his career. It's about him reclaiming authorship. The camera pulls back, capturing the table, the hosts, the audience, all suspended inside a moment. That feels bigger than television. And everyone knows the final part won't be about words anymore. It will be about consequences. The applause doesn't fade this time. It crashes. It rolls through the studio in waves, loud enough that the floor seems to vibrate beneath the chairs. Loud enough that the producers exchange glances they won't admit till later. This isn't the polite clapping that wraps up a segment. This is the sound people make when they know they've witnessed something irreversible. Joy Behar keeps clapping slower than the rest, her smile locked in place. The camera stays on her just a beat too long, long enough for the audience at home to notice what the studio audience already has. She isn't winning this moment. Eddie Murphy sits quietly, hands folded, gaze steady. He doesn't bask in it. He doesn't nod in acknowledgement. He lets the noise pass over him like weather he predicted long before it arrived. Whoopi finally breaks the spell. Well, she says, voice warm but careful, I think it's safe to say that landed. Laughter bursts out, releasing some of the pressure. The audience exhales as one. Joy chuckles too, though it sounds thinner now. You always did know how to make an exit, she says. Eddie turns to her. This isn't an exit, he replies calmly. Another beat. It's a reminder. The applause surges again. The director cuts to commercial moments later, but the energy doesn't shut off with the lights. It follows them off camera, behind the desk, into the corridors where staff members whisper instead of speak. As soon as the mics go cold, the room changes temperature. Joy exhales, finally dropping the performance smile. Well, she says, half laughing, half sighing. That escalated. Eddie stands, offering a polite nod. Conversations usually do when they're honest. There's no anger in his voice. No triumph, just certainty. Whoopi places a hand briefly on Eddie's arm. You said what needed to be said, she tells him. He smiles at her. So did you? Just differently. Across the studio, interns are already checking their phones. Notifications stack on top of each other like falling dominoes. Clips are circulating fast. Eddie Murphy silences the view. Commas come back in. Talk show history. Joy Behar left, speechless. Within minutes, the moment is no longer contained by studio walls. It spills onto timelines, comment sections, group chats. People argue, rewind, rewatch. Quote him, I didn't disappear. I chose silence. Relevance belongs to people with microphones. This isn't an exit. It's a reminder. Hashtags begin to trend. Some praise Eddie for his composure, calling it masterful, surgical, devastating without cruelty. Others defend Joy, arguing that tough questions are the point, that discomfort is the currency of real conversation. But almost everyone agrees on one thing: the calm made it worse. Late-night hosts joke about it. Social commentators analyze body language frame by frame. Clips of Joy's paused expression loop endlessly, frozen in the exact moment. Eddie, meanwhile, goes home. No interviews, no statements, no victory lap. That's silence again, and this time it's intentional. The next morning, headlines soften. The story matures. Writers stop asking who won and start asking why. It resonated because people recognize something in what happened. The fear of being declared finished. The exhaustion of proving worth. The quiet strength of refusing to rush. In an industry built on noise, Eddie Murphy reminded everyone that stillness can be louder than shouting. Joy Behar returns to the table the next day, professional as ever. But viewers notice a change. Her questions come differently now, more measured, more careful with the weight of words. Because moments like that leave fingerprints, they change how rooms behave. And long after the clip stopped trending, the feeling remains, that rare sense of having watched something real, unscripted, and unrepeatable. A calm man didn't raise his voice. He didn't attack. He didn't storm out. He simply stood still long enough for the truth to catch up. And now it's your turn. What did you see in that moment? Was it defiance? Was it dignity? Or was it something even deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And if you want more explosive cinematic stories that pull you inside the moment and refuse to let go, subscribe to Neon Narration. Hit like and share this story with someone who understands the power of calm in a loud world. Because sometimes the most brutal comebacks are whispered. All